using 50k of your own super to buy your first home. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heiser here, and welcome to another episode of Heiser Says. Grab your stein of coffee, because the Liberal Party have come out with, their policy or approach to encourage or support first home buyers. Now, remember, Labor's policy, they were offering 10,000 people the chance to have the government own 40% of your house. Okay? Labor, we're going to buy people's houses or a chunk of people's houses to help them get into housing, where the Liberals are letting you harness your own super, use your own superannuation to buy a house. Now, fundamentally, I have issue with super with regards to its, paternalistic. I can understand the advantages of it and all the benefits of it and how it's smart in the long term, but it's taking away responsibility from the individual and forcing them to save. A portion of your money is locked away there that you can't use. Now, honestly, I wish I could have, back when I bought this place, taken a big chunk of my money and my wife's superannuation money and put it off our mortgage. I really would have loved that. That would have been fantastic. And, I wouldn't have gotten the returns on the super, but the capital growth on the house would mean that would be quite a healthy return on that money. And it would also mean there'd be less stress. A lot of money and finances is about psychology. And the older you get, often you'd rather do with a few less returns, but have a more comfortable, less stress-free life. If I had a big chunk less on my mortgage because I could have deployed superannuation years ago, that means my repayments would be less, particularly when times get tough. And when people retire and own their own house, it's always a very different story to people who don't own their own houses. So let's have a look, because there's going to be a whole lot of people that are opposed to this because, it's going to pump up housing. Because the issue is supply is just going to isn't going to match the increased purchasing power of people, and it will exacerbate the divide. But still, fundamentally, I agree that people should have access to their own super to spend how they wish. If they want to do it to put a house over their heads, fantastic. Nothing's more frustrating when you have all this money sitting there and you can't even get into a house. So, harnessing super to realise the Australian dream of home ownership. And this is a media release from the Liberal Party, released today. The great Australian dream of home ownership will be unlocked sooner for thousands of first home buyers who will now be able to harness their superannuation to get into the property market. Under the Super Home Buyer Scheme, first home buyers will be able to invest up to 40% of their superannuation, up to a maximum of $50,000, to help with the purchase of their first home. So is that $50,000 for a combined couple, or is that $50,000 each? So if you're married, you each chuck in $50,000, that's $100,000 right there. It will mean because you've got to remember, a lot of people will buy a house and then they'll withdraw their super in a big lump sum when they retire, and then they'll pay off the mortgage. That happens too. It will mean Australians can buy their first home sooner by slashing the time taken to save a deposit by 3 years on average. And we just looked at recently how the length of time it takes for people to save a deposit has just grown. It's just gotten crazy, everyone. Over a decade in some circumstances. And I know that's not everyone. I know that's just the average. But the scheme will apply to both new and existing homes, with the invested amount to be returned to their superannuation fund when the house is sold, including a share of any capital gain. Okay. So if you're selling the house, you've got to pay it back into your super. So rather than Labor's policy of the taxpayer paying this money in to help people get into housing, it's people using their own super. And then they've got to put it back in afterwards. I'm really liking this policy, to be quite honest. I think this is a much better alternative to what Labor's putting on the table. So, this means that a person's super is harnessed to purchase a first home while also protecting their long-term savings plan for retirement. Because, you're going to get capital growth in your property, guys. Even if it drops down for a few years. A home, we're not day trading here. We're not buying Luna crypto, guys, and watching it crash, which that's an entirely sad story here. You're buying property. It's slow moving. and people are going to ride out tough times. You've also got to think, too, just the reduced stress people have of actually having their own home, having somewhere to live rather than renting and moving around and all of these issues. Being able to sink your roots into a community in an area. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said supporting first home buyers was a key part of the Morrison government's plan. Our plan for the future is focused on supporting more Australians to realise their dream of home ownership. Super should be harnessed to support the aspiration of many thousands of families who want to buy a home. Our plan makes it easier for first home buyers to save for a deposit, reducing the time people need to pay rent, and also means a smaller mortgage with less debt and smaller repayments. Yes, that's what I like. That's the best part of it. That means your stress levels are going to be less. It's a plan, and just think about it. You're dealing with your own super, so you're not dealing with all the bureaucrats of the government. Which is the Labor's policy. It's a plan that gets the balance right. It utilises money that's currently locked away to transform a family's life, with the money then responsibly returned to a super fund at the time of the home sale. Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Housing, Michael Sukkar, said the super home buyer scheme would be a game changer for aspirational Australians and provided hope and opportunity to first home buyers. The Liberal and national governments are fundamentally committed to helping more Australians achieve their dream of home ownership, the minister said. By allowing people to access their super and buy a house, we are providing the opportunity to turn the dream of home ownership into a reality. Allowing your super to work for you to purchase your first home and then being returned to your super at a later date achieves the best result of both worlds, home ownership and retirement security. Minister for Superannuation, Jane Hume, said this is a 2-for-1 win for Australians, a home and a return on retirement savings. Well, think about it. How much of your super is in our real estate investment trusts? Now you're going to expose a portion of your super to real estate. But it is, in the short to medium term, it's going to have an impact on prices. Don't It always does. Under the super home buyer scheme, you keep building your super savings in the home you live in. When you sell, the amount you invest is returned to your super plus a share of any capital gains. So rather than the government owning a share of your house and you having to sell and give it back to them, it goes back into your super party. Okay, now we've got to compare this. We've got two options here on the table. We've got Labor's proposal of 10,000 people getting 40% home ownership by the government. And now we've got Liberals' proposal of you using your own superannuation, that's your money, so taking it out of the bank-controlled and the hands of the union-controlled super funds, and they're gonna chuck a hissy fit about this, and using it to invest in a home. Now it's going to have, well, both schemes are going to have impacts on the housing, but what's going to be beneficial for the individual in the longer term? You know, money in the hands of the government, or money in the hands of your own retirement savings. So, the Liberals know it's Australians' money, not these super funds, and not the government's. Australians work hard to earn it. They work hard to save it. $1 in 10 of everything they earn is saved in super right now. Superannuation is there to help Australians in their retirement, and the Super Home Buyer Scheme will ensure Australians can use those savings they are responsibly building up to improve the quality of life now and the standard of living in retirement. The Super Home Buyer Scheme will start on the 1st of July 2023. There are no income or property caps under the Super Home Buyer Scheme, with eligibility restricted to first home buyers who must have separately saved 5% of the deposit. Okay, so you can't use this all for your deposit. Over the last 3 years, the Morrison government's housing policies have supported more than 300,000 Australians into home ownership. Only the coalition government has a comprehensive plan to help Australians realise the dreams of home ownership. Under the Liberal and National Plan, the Home Guarantee Scheme will next year help 50,000 Australians into a home, including 10,000 places for new homes in regional Australia, and the First Home Super Saver Scheme is already helping Australians make voluntary savings. Yep. And some of the industry response, we can see here from the HIA, they're supporting this. The Liberal Party's announcement today that if re-elected, they will allow Australians to access up to $50,000 from their superannuation to fund a deposit to help them buy their first home is a welcome one, and an initiative that the HIA has championed. So there we go, guys. We've got Liberals' proposal to help people get into housing. Well, let's have a bit of a talk about this one, everyone. So, will this drive up housing costs for first home buyers? Maybe it'll shift some people away from the bank of mum and dad, which isn't as big as the media plays up, to now using their own superannuation. Maybe it means more people can get into property earlier rather than later. Because, here you go, everyone. We've had our first recession in 28 years. And what did the government do? They propped up housing. They used housing to manipulate the economy, to stimulate the economy. I can't see this changing here in Australia. I can't see there being a culture shift from either Labor or Liberal to change away from using housing to stimulate the economy. I like this policy because it's using superannuation. Honestly, I would rather we abolish superannuation and people can voluntarily invest their money there or use other ways to do it. I understand why that will never happen. Australia isn't the country that really, is built on individual responsibility. We're built on the, smallest sacrifice essentially for the greatest good. The least harm to the majority, the least harm to the individual for the greatest good for the majority. That's what Australia is built on. That's our culture. We're not America. We're different to that. And people want stability. People want safety. People want boredom. People want houses. So what do you reckon, guys? How can we have a scheme like this where people can use their own super funds to get into houses, but the property prices don't go to the moon? Well, you need to increase supply. And that comes down to the local council level. You need to address the not in my backyard crowd. You need to allow greater density of development. You need to make it cheaper to build. We need to move some of the fluff in the construction code. And for one, I'd say a lot of that is the energy rating assessments requirements. Remove the star rating for houses. Remove all of these energy requirements. Make them optional extras that people can pay extra for if they want. You need to make it cheaper. You need headworks charges to go down. We need to work at the local level to get supply up. That's what really needs to happen. And maybe some of the inner city people in their nice little suburbs that love living in their little, Queenslanders here in Brisbane, you're going to have to put up with some apartments around you or some townhouses around you, like back in the old days, to densify to get costs down. So what do you think, guys? Are you a supporter of this proposal? Which do you prefer, Labor or Liberals? Suggestion for addressing housing costs. I prefer this over Labor's proposal, 100%. It's going to affect housing, but come on, guys, that's going to happen anyway. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support us, there are a few ways you can. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon, use any of our referral links from Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Aussie Broadband, or contact us if you need architectural services. We've got a lot of education, commercial, and resource sector experience. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. And we'll have to see how this goes. Will this flip your election? Rachel was talking to one of her friends. She's voting for Labor because they've got more handouts and putting UAP second preference. Well, because she wants that 3% mortgage cap. There you go.